The sound of hoofbeats pounded against the hard, packed earth, matching Willow Ackerman's racing heart as she pushed her stolen mare to its limits, the moon offering just enough light to navigate the treacherous terrain of Nebraska's open plains. She dared not look back, knowing the men who'd paid for her like cattle would be close behind, their voices carrying on the night wind with promises of retribution that made her blood run cold. Willow's lungs burned as the cool night air rushed past her face. 3 days ago, she'd been serving drinks at a saloon in St. Louis when a well-dressed man with cold eyes offered her a position at his establishment in Omaha. The promise of better wages and respectable work had been too tempting to resist. It wasn't until she was loaded onto a train with 5 other young women that she realized the horrible truth: they weren't being hired. They were being sold. The mare stumbled slightly, forcing Willow to grip the saddle horn tighter. Her hands were raw from holding the reins, her thighs aching from hours of riding. She'd managed to escape during a stop at a small station outside of Lincoln, slipping away while her captors were negotiating with a local businessman. She'd stolen the horse in desperation, knowing she would hang if caught as a horse thief, but preferring that fate to what awaited her if those men recaptured her. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Willow spotted a small farmstead in the distance. A modest house, a large barn, and several outbuildings stood silhouetted against the brightening sky. She hesitated, knowing she risked bringing danger to whoever lived there, but her horse was spent, and she had nowhere else to go. Drawing closer, she could see that the property was well maintained. A windmill creaked nearby, and the smell of hay and livestock carried on the breeze. Making a split-second decision, she guided the exhausted mare toward the barn, praying that whoever owned this land would be more merciful than the men pursuing her. Nathan Prescott woke with the sun, as he did every morning since purchasing his ranch 5 years ago in 1878. At 32, he'd built a respectable spread just outside of Red Cloud, Nebraska, transforming what had once been barren land into a productive cattle ranch through sheer determination and back-breaking work. He swung his legs over the side of his bed and reached for his boots, mentally cataloging the day's tasks as he dressed. The morning routine was so familiar he could perform it half asleep: stoke the fire, put the coffee on, wash his face, then head to the barn to begin chores. It wasn't until he stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air, that he noticed something amiss. The door to his barn stood slightly ajar, though he distinctly remembered latching it the night before. Nathan's hand moved instinctively to the revolver holstered at his hip as he approached the barn cautiously. Rustlers weren't common in these parts, but a man living alone couldn't be too careful. He pushed the door open slowly, wincing at the creak of the hinges, and peered into the shadowy interior. His eyes took a moment to adjust to the dim light. The horses shuffled in their stalls, and the familiar scents of hay, leather, and animals greeted him. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, but then he spotted an unfamiliar mare, still saddled though clearly exhausted, drinking from the water trough. "Who's there?" Nathan called out, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. "Show yourself." For a moment, only silence answered him. Then, a small rustling sound drew his attention to the hayloft above. Nathan moved further into the barn, positioning himself to see up into the shadows of the loft. "I've got a gun and I know how to use it," he warned, his thumb resting on the hammer of his revolver. "Come down now and we can talk this through civilly." After another moment of silence, a soft voice, unmistakably female, responded, "Please don't shoot. I'm not here to cause trouble." Nathan's brow furrowed in surprise. A woman, out here alone? "Then you'd better come down and explain yourself," he replied, relaxing his stance slightly but keeping his hand near his weapon. There was more rustling, and then a slender figure appeared at the edge of the loft. She climbed down the ladder with careful movements, her skirts hampering her descent. When she finally turned to face him, Nathan felt a jolt of surprise. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with hair the color of wheat that had escaped its pins to fall around her face. Her dress was torn and dirt-stained, and there was a wildness in her eyes that spoke of desperation and fear. Despite the dishevelment, there was no denying she was beautiful, with delicate features and clear blue eyes that met his gaze directly. "I'm sorry for trespassing," she said, her voice steadier than her appearance would suggest. "I needed a place to rest my horse, and myself." Nathan studied her for a long moment, taking in the bruises on her wrists and the way she held herself, as if expecting a blow. "You're running from something," he stated rather than asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Someone. Several someones actually. They'll be coming this way, I expect." "Lawmen?" Nathan questioned, his expression hardening. "No," she answered quickly. "Not lawmen. These men have no regard for the law." Something in her tone made Nathan believe her. He'd always considered himself a good judge of character, and while this woman was clearly hiding something, he didn't sense dishonesty in her words. "I'm Nathan Prescott," he said finally, lowering his hand from his gun. "This is my ranch you found yourself on." Relief visibly washed over her features. "Willow," she replied, then after a moment's hesitation, "Willow Ackerman. I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Prescott." "I'll be on my way as soon as possible." Nathan glanced at the mare, noting its trembling legs and lathered flanks. "Your horse won't make it another mile in that condition. It needs rest, feed, and water." Willow followed his gaze and bit her lip. "I don't have much time." "These men who are after you," Nathan said carefully. "What do they want?" She met his eyes again, and something in her gaze made him uncomfortable, not because of any threat she posed, but because of what it revealed about her situation. "They paid for me," she said simply, the words falling between them like stones. "In St. Louis. I was tricked, along with other girls. They're taking us to Omaha to work in houses of ill repute." Nathan's jaw tightened as understanding dawned. Human trafficking wasn't unheard of in the territories, though it usually remained hidden beneath a veneer of legitimate business. His father had raised him to respect women, and the thought of someone being sold like property made his blood boil. "How many men?" he asked, his tone shifting to something harder. "3, Willow answered. "The one in charge is called Elliot, the others are just hired muscle." Nathan nodded slowly, his mind working through the implications. Harboring a fugitive, even one fleeing such circumstances, could bring trouble down on his head. But turning her away wasn't an option he could live with. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked abruptly. The question seemed to catch her off guard. "Yesterday morning, before I escaped." "Come to the house," he said, turning toward the barn door. "You can clean up and get some food while I see to your horse." Willow didn't move. "Mr. Prescott, I appreciate your kindness, but these men are dangerous. I can't bring that kind of trouble to your doorstep." Nathan paused, looking back at her. "Miss Ackerman, I've faced down rustlers, hostile tribes, and more than my share of desperate men since settling here. 3 slave traders don't frighten me." His expression softened slightly. "Besides, turning away someone in need isn't how my mother raised me." Something in his steadfast demeanor must have reassured her, because after a moment's consideration, Willow nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't forget this." Nathan led the way from the barn to his modest house. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, a simple 2-story structure built of local timber and stone, but it was solid and well maintained. Inside, It was sparsely furnished but clean, with a large stone fireplace dominating the main room. "The washroom is through there," Nathan said, gesturing to a door off the kitchen. "There should be clean towels on the shelf. I'll get some coffee started and find something for you to eat." Willow hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware of how alone she was with this stranger. But something about Nathan Prescott's straightforward manner inspired trust. He could have turned her in or taken advantage of her vulnerable position, yet he'd offered help without conditions. "I won't be long," she promised, disappearing into the washroom. The small room contained a copper tub, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a shelf stocked with towels and soap. Willow poured water from the pitcher into the basin and scrubbed her face and hands, wincing as the cloth passed over various cuts and bruises. Looking in the small mirror mounted above the washstand, she hardly recognized herself. 3 days of fear and hard travel had left dark circles under her eyes, and her normally neat hair was a tangled mess. She did what she could to make herself presentable, using a comb she found on the shelf to work through the worst of the knots in her hair before rebraiding it. When she emerged from the washroom, she found Nathan setting a plate of bacon, beans, and cornbread on the table. "It's not fancy," he said with a shrug, "but it'll fill you up." Willow sat at the rough wooden table, suddenly aware of just how hungry she was. She tried to eat slowly and with some semblance of manners, but the food was gone in minutes. Nathan refilled her coffee cup without comment and sat across from her. "Now," he said once she'd finished, "tell me everything. If I'm going to help you, I need to know what we're facing." Willow wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, drawing strength from its solidity. Then, starting with the offer of employment in St. Louis, she told Nathan everything about waking on the train to find herself locked in a private car with 5 other young women, about the man called Elliot who spoke of them as if they were livestock, about their stop near Lincoln where she'd managed to slip away while the men were negotiating with a potential buyer for 2 of the girls. "I stole the horse," she admitted, shame coloring her voice. "I've never stolen anything before, but I was desperate. They would have caught me on foot." Nathan nodded, his expression grave. "You did what you had to do to survive. No court would hang you for that." "Elliot would," Willow said quietly. "He made it very clear what would happen to any of us who tried to escape. He said he'd paid good money for us, and he wouldn't let that investment go to waste." "How far behind you do you think they are?" Nathan asked. Willow considered this. "I rode hard through the night, but I had to rest the horse a few times. They have better mounts than what I took, and they know this territory better than I do. They could be hours behind, maybe less." Nathan stood and moved to the window, scanning the horizon. The rising sun illuminated the rolling plains surrounding his property, but there was no sign of riders yet. "We need a plan," he said, turning back to her. "They'll come here, it's the only settlement for miles, and they'll be checking every homestead along their path." Fear gripped Willow's heart. "I should keep moving. I've already put you in enough danger." "On that exhausted horse, you wouldn't make it 10 miles, Nathan countered. "Besides, running only works if you have somewhere to go. Do you?" Willow's silence was answer enough. "I thought not," Nathan said, though his tone wasn't unkind. "No, our best option is to face them here on ground I know with the law on our side." "The law?" Willow asked skeptically. "These men don't care about the law, Mr. Prescott." "Nathan," he corrected. "And they might not care about the law, but they do care about staying alive. Men like that are cowards at heart. They prey on the vulnerable because they're too weak to face a fair fight." He moved to a cabinet near the fireplace and unlocked it, revealing a small arsenal, several rifles, a shotgun, and boxes of ammunition. "I fought in the war," he explained, seeing her wide-eyed expression. "Learned the value of being prepared." He took out a Winchester repeating rifle and checked its action. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to hide in the root cellar under the house. There's only one way in or out, and I can defend it easily. When these men come, I'll talk to them, send them on their way if possible. If not—" He shrugged. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." Willow stood, shaking her head. "I can't let you risk your life for me. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Nathan replied. "I know you're not property to be bought and sold. I know what those men plan to do with you is wrong. And I know I couldn't live with myself if I turned you away." His simple declaration stunned Willow into silence. In a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty and deception lately, Nathan Prescott's straightforward decency was like water in the desert. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan nodded once, then returned to practical matters. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me," Willow confirmed. "We had a small farm outside St. Louis before the fever took my parents last year. I'm not an expert, but I know which end of a gun to point." "Good," Nathan said, handing her a Colt revolver from the cabinet. "Keep this with you, just in case." The weight of the weapon in her hand was both reassuring and terrifying. Willow checked that it was loaded, then tucked it into the pocket of her skirt. "Now," Nathan continued, "let me show you where you'll be hiding." He led her to the kitchen pantry, where he moved aside several barrels to reveal a trapdoor in the floor. Opening it exposed a ladder leading down into darkness. "It's not comfortable," he apologized, "but it's dry and safe. I store root vegetables and preserves down there through the winter." Willow peered into the dark space. "How will I know when it's safe to come out?" "I'll come for you," Nathan promised. "If I don't—" He hesitated, then continued in a more somber tone. "If I don't, wait until nightfall, then take the north trail through the woods. It leads to the town of Red Cloud. Ask for Sheriff Miller, he's a good man." The implication of his words settled heavily between them. This man was willing to die to protect her, a stranger who had brought danger to his door. Before Willow could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Nathan's head snapped up, his expression hardening. "They're coming sooner than I expected," he said grimly. "Get down there now. No matter what you hear, don't come out until I come for you." Willow hesitated for just a moment, then impulsively reached out and squeezed his hand. "Be careful," she whispered. Nathan's fingers briefly tightened around hers. "I always am," he replied with a ghost of a smile. Then he was helping her onto the ladder, closing the trapdoor above her, and plunging her into darkness. Willow heard the scrape of barrels being moved back into place, then Nathan's footsteps receding. In the cool darkness of the root cellar, Willow sank down against the earthen wall, the revolver clutched tightly in her hands, and waited. Nathan moved with purpose, checking that his weapons were loaded and accessible. He positioned a shotgun behind the front door and slipped a knife into his boot. Then he moved to the front porch, deliberately keeping his stance relaxed and unthreatening as he watched 3 riders approach his property. The men rode hard, their horses kicking up dust clouds visible from a distance. They slowed as they neared the house, clearly assessing the situation. Nathan leaned against a porch post, thumbs hooked in his belt, the picture of casual interest. "Morning, gentlemen," he called as they drew near enough to hear. "Something I can help you with." The lead rider, a well-dressed man with a neat beard and cold eyes, reined in his horse in front of the house. The other 2 men flanked him, rougher-looking fellows with the hard expressions of men who made their living through violence. "Perhaps," the leader said smoothly. "I'm Elliot Burke. My associates and I are tracking a fugitive, a young woman who stole a horse and fled from Lincoln yesterday. We have reason to believe she passed this way." Nathan maintained his relaxed posture. "Don't get many travelers through these parts. What this woman do exactly?" Burke's smile didn't reach his eyes. She's a thief, as I mentioned. Stole a valuable horse, but more importantly, she's unwell, prone to delusions and hysteria. Her family has engaged us to return her to proper care. Nathan nodded thoughtfully as if considering this explanation. That's so. Must be a mighty important family to send 3 men after one confused girl. Something dangerous flickered in Burke's eyes. Indeed, the father is a business associate of mine, quite concerned about his daughter's welfare. Understandable, Nathan replied. But as I said, I haven't seen anyone fitting that description. Just me and my livestock out here. Burke's gaze shifted to the barn, then back to Nathan. You wouldn't mind if we had a look around your property, would you, just to be thorough? Nathan straightened slightly, his hand casually moving closer to his holstered revolver. Actually, I would mind. This is private property, Mr. Burke, and you gentlemen don't appear to be representing any official law enforcement capacity. The 2 thugs exchanged glances, their hands drifting toward their weapons. Burke held up a hand to restrain them, his smile growing colder. I assure you, we have the authority to retrieve what belongs to us, he said, dropping the pretense. The girl is my property, purchased legally in St. Louis. I've paid good money for her and I intend to collect on my investment. Nathan's expression hardened. A person can't be property, Mr. Burke, not anymore, not in this country. Burke laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. How quaint, a moralist in the middle of nowhere. His tone shifted to something harder. Step aside, cowboy. We're going to search your property, and if we find the girl, we're taking her. Try to stop us and you'll regret it. Nathan didn't move. 3 against 1 might seem like good odds to you, he said calmly. But I should warn you I was a sharpshooter with the 2nd Nebraska during the war. First man to make a move against me or my property will be dead before he clears leather. The confidence in his voice gave the thugs pause, but Burke seemed merely annoyed. This is your final warning, Burke said. Give us the girl or face the consequences. She's not here, Nathan insisted. But even if she was, I wouldn't hand her over to men who think they can buy and sell human beings. Burke's face contorted with rage. Search the place, he ordered his men. Kill him if he interferes. The men dismounted, drawing their weapons. Nathan's hand moved in a blur, his revolver clearing its holster with practiced speed. The first shot caught the nearest thug in the shoulder, spinning him around with the impact. The second shot went wide as the other man dove for cover behind the water trough. Burke yanked his horse around, retreating to a safe distance as gunfire erupted. Nathan ducked behind a porch pillar as bullets splintered the wood around him. He returned fire methodically, conserving ammunition while keeping the attackers pinned down. The wounded man was crawling toward the barn, leaving a trail of blood on the dusty ground. The second thug had taken position behind the water trough, firing sporadically at the house. Burke remained on horseback, circling at a distance, shouting orders to his men. Burn him out if you have to. Burke called. Find the girl. Nathan grimaced. If they set fire to the house, Willow would be trapped in the root cellar. He needed to end this quickly. Making a split-second decision, Nathan rolled from the porch to the cover of a nearby wagon. From this position, he had a clear shot at the man behind the water trough. Taking careful aim, he squeezed the trigger. The man jerked backward, clutching his chest before slumping to the ground. Burke cursed loudly, spurring his horse toward the barn where the wounded thug had disappeared. Nathan knew he had to stop them from searching the property. If they found evidence of Willow's presence, they might tear the place apart looking for her. Running in a crouch, Nathan made his way to the corner of the house, then sprinted for the barn. He reached it just as Burke dismounted, gun drawn, shouting for his injured companion. It's over, Burke, Nathan called from the barn entrance, his rifle aimed steadily. "Your men are down. Leave my property now or join them." Burke spun around, firing wildly. Nathan felt a searing pain as a bullet grazed his upper arm, but his own shot was more accurate. Burke staggered backward, dropping his pistol as he clutched his bleeding hand. "You've made a grave mistake," Burke snarled through clenched teeth. "Do you have any idea who I am, who I'm connected to?" "You're a dead man, Prescott." "Maybe," Nathan acknowledged, advancing with his rifle still trained on Burke. "But you'll be a lot deader if you don't get on that horse and ride away right now." The wounded thug emerged from behind some hay bales, his gun raised despite his injured shoulder. Nathan reacted instantly, swinging his rifle around and firing. The man collapsed without a sound. Burke's eyes widened as he realized he was now alone. The calculating look that crossed his face told Nathan that the man was weighing his options and finding them lacking. "This isn't over," Burke promised, backing toward his horse. "I'll be back with more men." "You do that," Nathan replied evenly. "I'll be waiting. But understand this, the woman is under my protection now. Anyone who comes looking for her will get the same welcome your friends got." Burke mounted his horse awkwardly, his wounded hand making it difficult. "You can't protect her forever," he spat. "And when she's mine again, I'll make sure she suffers for every bullet fired today." Nathan's finger tightened on the trigger, sorely tempted to end Burke's threat permanently. But he wasn't a murderer, and shooting a man in the back as he fled would be murder, no matter how justified it might feel. "Ride away," Nathan ordered, his voice hard as iron. "Don't look back." With a final venomous glare, Burke spurred his horse and galloped away from the ranch. Nathan watched until he disappeared over the horizon, then slowly lowered his rifle. The property was eerily silent after the chaos of gunfire. One man lay dead by the water trough, another in the barn. The ground was churned up by horses' hooves and marked with dark patches of blood. Nathan's arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed him, but he ignored it for now. He needed to check that Burke was truly gone, secure the property, and only then could he retrieve Willow from her hiding place. After confirming that Burke had indeed fled and wasn't lying in wait nearby, Nathan returned to the house. He moved the barrels aside and opened the trapdoor to the root cellar. "Willow," he called softly, "it's over. You can come up now." For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then he heard movement below, and Willow appeared at the bottom of the ladder, the revolver still clutched in her hand. "Is it safe?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "For now," Nathan confirmed. "Burke got away, but his men won't be troubling anyone ever again." Willow climbed the ladder, her movements stiff from the time spent in the confined space. When she reached the top, she noticed the bloodstain spreading on Nathan's shirt sleeve. "You're hurt," she gasped, immediately guiding him to a chair. "Let me help you." "It's just a graze," Nathan protested, but he allowed her to examine the wound. Willow worked efficiently, cutting away the torn fabric and cleaning the injury with water from the kettle. Her hands were gentle but sure as she applied a poultice of herbs she found in Nathan's kitchen stores, then bandaged the wound with strips torn from a clean dish towel. "You've done this before," Nathan observed, watching her work. "My mother was known for her healing skills," Willow explained. "She taught me what she could before she passed." When she had finished tending to his arm, Willow sank into a chair across from him, the events of the day finally catching up with her. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the revolver on the table between them. "Those men," she said quietly. "They're dead because of me. They're dead because they chose to attack an armed man on his own property," Nathan corrected firmly. "You bear no guilt for their choices." Willow nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. "What happens now? Burke will come back just as he threatened." Nathan considered this. We have some time. He'll need to recruit more men and his injured hand will slow him down. But yes, he'll be back. Men like that don't let go of what they consider theirs. I should leave, Willow said, though the prospect clearly terrified her. Put distance between us. You've done enough already. And go where? Nathan asked reasonably. With what money? On what horse? Burke will be watching all the nearby towns, and a woman traveling alone attracts attention. He leaned forward, his expression serious. The safest place for you right now is here. We'll ride into Red Cloud tomorrow and speak with Sheriff Miller. He's an honest man, and once he understands the situation, he'll help us. Willow studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Why are you doing this? Risking your life for someone you just met. Nathan was silent for a moment, considering his answer. My sister was 16 when she disappeared from our family farm in Iowa, he finally said, his voice low. We later learned she'd been taken by men like Burke. My father spent years searching for her, but we never found her. I came west partly to start fresh, partly hoping I might somehow find her. Understanding dawned in Willow's eyes. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I couldn't help her, Nathan continued, meeting Willow's gaze directly. But I can help you, and maybe, in some small way, that balances the scales. The naked honesty in his words touched something deep inside Willow. For the first time since escaping from Burke's clutches, she felt a fragile hope take root. Thank you, she said simply, the words wholly inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Nathan nodded once, then stood. We need to take care of those bodies before nightfall. Then we'll secure the house and get some rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. The grim task of burying Burke's men took the remainder of the daylight hours. Nathan dug the graves while Willow prepared a simple supper from the provisions in his pantry. They ate in relative silence, both exhausted from the day's events. As night fell, Nathan showed Willow to the small second bedroom. It was meant for family, he explained somewhat awkwardly. Never had the chance to use it much. It's perfect, Willow assured him, touched by his consideration. The room was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a small chest of drawers, and a rocking chair by the window. It was the first real bed she'd seen in days, and the prospect of sleeping somewhere safe was overwhelming. Get some rest, Nathan said, pausing at the door. I'll keep watch for a while. Willow wanted to protest, to insist that he needed rest too after being wounded, but the determined set of his jaw told her it would be futile. Wake me in a few hours, she said instead. I can take a turn watching. Nathan looked as if he might argue, but then nodded. All right. Sleep well, Miss Ackerman, Willow, she corrected gently. After everything that's happened, I think we've moved beyond formalities. A small smile softened Nathan's features. Willow, he agreed. Good night. As the door closed behind him, Willow sank onto the bed, her body aching with exhaustion. Despite the danger that still loomed on the horizon, she felt safer than she had in days. In Nathan Prescott, she had found an unexpected ally, a man of principle in a world that seemed increasingly devoid of it. With that comforting thought, she let her eyes close, surrendering to the sleep her body desperately needed. Nathan sat by the front window, rifle across his lap, watching the moonlit landscape for any sign of movement. His wounded arm throbbed dully, a persistent reminder of the day's violence. He wasn't a stranger to killing. The war had seen to that, but taking a life never sat easily with him, necessary though it sometimes was. His thoughts turned to the woman sleeping down the hall. There was something about Willow Ackerman that intrigued him beyond his desire to help someone in her situation. Perhaps it was her courage in the face of overwhelming odds, or the quiet dignity she maintained despite her circumstances. Whatever it was, he found himself wanting to know more about her, who she had been before Burke's men had upended her life. What dreams she might have had. Such thoughts were dangerous, Nathan reminded himself firmly. Willow was in his care temporarily, nothing more. Once the situation with Burke was resolved, she would move on with her life, and he would return to the solitude he had grown accustomed to. Still, as the night deepened around him, Nathan couldn't help but wonder what it might be like to have someone like Willow in his life permanently, someone to share meals with, to talk with in the evenings, to build a future with. It had been a long time since he'd allowed himself to consider such possibilities. Pushing these thoughts aside, Nathan refocused on his vigil. Burke was still out there, nursing his wounded pride and plotting his revenge. The danger was far from over, and allowing himself to be distracted by impossible dreams would serve neither him nor Willow. The night passed uneventfully. Despite his intention to wake Willow for her turn at watch, Nathan found himself unwilling to disturb her rest. She had been through enough without losing a night's sleep as well. So he maintained his position by the window, watching as the stars wheeled overhead and dawn gradually lightened the eastern sky. It was only when he heard movement in the kitchen that Nathan realized he had dozed off in his chair. He straightened, wincing at the stiffness in his neck and the renewed pain in his wounded arm. "You were supposed to wake me," Willow chided gently, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee in each hand. Nathan accepted the offered cup gratefully. "You needed the rest more than I did." Willow raised an eyebrow skeptically but didn't argue. She was wearing the same dress as yesterday, though she had clearly made efforts to clean and mend it. Her hair was neatly braided once more, and some color had returned to her cheeks after a night of proper sleep. "How's your arm?" she asked, nodding toward his bandaged wound. "Sore, but it'll heal," Nathan replied. "I've had worse." Willow sat in the chair across from him, cradling her own coffee cup. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about going to Red Cloud to speak with the sheriff." "You're having doubts," Nathan guessed. "Not about the sheriff," Willow clarified. "About bringing more people into this. Burke seems connected. What if the law can't protect us? What if his influence extends to Red Cloud?" It was a valid concern. Men like Elliot Burke often had officials in their pockets, particularly in frontier towns where money spoke louder than justice. "Sheriff Miller isn't the kind of man who can be bought," Nathan said with confidence. "I've known him for 5 years, and I've never seen him bend the law for anyone, no matter how wealthy or connected." "Even so," Willow persisted, "what can the law do? It would be my word against Burke's. He could claim I'm his wife or a runaway servant who stole from him, without proof." She trailed off, the hopelessness of her situation apparent in her expression. Nathan considered this. "The other girls," he said suddenly. "The ones who were with you on the train, they could corroborate your story. If they could be found," Willow said doubtfully. "And if they were willing to speak against Burke, they were terrified of him, Nathan." "With good reason," Nathan agreed grimly. He fell silent for a moment, thinking. "There's another option," he said finally. "We could leave, head west, maybe to Colorado or California. Start fresh where Burke can't find us." The implications of his suggestion hung in the air between them, not just Willow leaving, but both of them together. It was a reckless proposal, one that would mean abandoning the ranch Nathan had worked so hard to build. Yet something in his expression told Willow he was entirely serious. "I couldn't ask that of you," she said softly. "This is your home." "It's just land and timber," Nathan replied with a shrug that belied the significance of what he was offering. "I can build again somewhere else." Willow was speechless, overwhelmed by his willingness to uproot his entire life for her sake. Before she could formulate a response, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Nathan was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "Riders coming," he said tensely, reaching for his rifle. "4 of them." Willow's heart raced with fear. "Burke?" "No," Nathan said, his posture relaxing slightly. "It's Sheriff Miller and some of his deputies." Relief flooded through Willow, followed quickly by apprehension. What if the sheriff didn't believe her story? What if he sided with Burke? Nathan seemed to sense her anxiety. "It's going to be all right," he assured her. "Miller is a fair man. He'll listen to what we have to say." He moved to the door, opening it as the riders approached the house. Willow remained standing in the main room, smoothing her skirts nervously, and wishing she had something more presentable to wear for this crucial meeting. Sheriff James Miller was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He dismounted with the fluid ease of a man accustomed to spending most of his days in the saddle and approached the porch where Nathan stood waiting. "Prescott," the sheriff greeted, his gaze taking in Nathan's bandaged arm and the fresh graves visible near the barn. "Looks like you've had some trouble out here." "You could say that," Nathan agreed. "What brings you out this way, Sheriff?" Miller's expression was grave. "Got word from a traveler who passed through early this morning. Said he saw a man riding hell for leather toward town, bleeding and cursing your name. Figured I'd better come check on things before trouble found its way to my doorstep." "You just missed it," Nathan said dryly. "The trouble arrived yesterday." The sheriff nodded toward the graves. "I can see that. Want to tell me what happened?" Nathan hesitated, glancing back at Willow, who stood nervously in the doorway. "It's a long story, Jim. You'd better come inside." Sheriff Miller signaled to his deputies to secure the perimeter, then followed Nathan into the house. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Willow, but his expression remained professional as Nathan made the introductions. "Miss Ackerman," the sheriff acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I take it you're somehow connected to whatever happened here yesterday." Willow straightened her shoulders, meeting the sheriff's gaze directly. "I am, Sheriff Miller, though not by choice." Over the next hour, sitting around Nathan's kitchen table, Willow recounted her ordeal from the initial deception incident, Louis to her escape near Lincoln and the subsequent confrontation at Nathan's ranch. She spoke clearly and concisely, omitting nothing, even the parts that painted her in a less favorable light, such as the theft of the horse. Sheriff Miller listened without interruption, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When Willow finished her account, the sheriff turned to Nathan. "And your part in this?" he asked. "You confirmed her story, then decided to take on 3 armed men rather than turn her over." "That's right," Nathan said simply. "Burke and his men made it clear what they intended to do with her. I couldn't be party to that." The sheriff was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. "The men you killed," he finally said. "You're certain they fired first?" "They did," Nathan confirmed. "I've got the bullet holes in my porch to prove it. And this," he added, indicating his wounded arm. Miller nodded slowly. "And this man Burke, you're sure he'll be back?" "Without a doubt," Nathan said grimly. "He's not the type to let something go, especially something he's paid for." The sheriff's gaze sharpened at this. "Human trafficking is a federal offense, Miss Ackerman. If what you've told me is true, this Burke fellow has broken numerous laws." "It's true," Willow affirmed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Every word." Sheriff Miller seemed to come to a decision. "I believe you," he said finally. "Both of you. But believing you and protecting you are 2 different matters. Burke may already be gathering reinforcements. If he's as connected as you suggest, they could be dangerous men." "What are you suggesting?" Nathan asked. "For now, I'm posting 2 of my deputies here at the ranch," Miller replied. I'll send a telegram to the federal marshal's office in Omaha requesting assistance. In the meantime, Miss Ackerman should come to town where we can better ensure her safety." Nathan shook his head. "No offense, Jim, but I'd rather keep her here. Town is the first place Burke will look when he returns. Besides, I can protect her." "You almost got yourself killed yesterday," Miller pointed out bluntly. "And that was just 3 men. What happens when Burke returns with 10 or 20? He has a point, Nathan," Willow said softly. "I've already put you in enough danger." Nathan's jaw set stubbornly. "I'm not sending you off with strangers, even if they wear badges. Burke tried to buy you once. Who's to say he won't try to bribe someone in town to give you up?" Sheriff Miller leaned back in his chair, studying Nathan with newfound understanding. It was clear that Nathan's protection of Willow had grown beyond simple moral obligation. "There is another solution," the sheriff said slowly. "One that would provide Miss Ackerman with legal protection beyond what my office can offer." "What's that?" Nathan asked warily. Miller looked between them. "Marriage," he said bluntly. "As a married woman, Miss Ackerman would have legal protections that an unmarried woman doesn't. Burke couldn't claim her as property or a runaway servant if she were legally Mrs. Prescott." Willow gasped, color flooding her cheeks. Nathan stared at the sheriff as if he'd suggested something outrageous. That's not." Nathan stammered, uncharacteristically flustered. "It's a practical solution," Miller continued, seemingly oblivious to their discomfort. "And a common one in these parts when a woman needs protection." "We barely know each other," Willow protested, though her heart was racing at the suggestion. "Marriage is supposed to be forever." "In these circumstances, it needn't be," the sheriff assured her. "Once the danger has passed and the federal marshals have Burke in custody, an annulment could be arranged if that's what you both wanted." Nathan finally found his voice. "This is absurd, Jim. You can't possibly be suggesting we enter into a marriage of convenience just to thwart Burke." "Can you think of a better solution?" Miller challenged. "One that keeps Miss Ackerman safe and allows you to keep her here under your protection, as you seem determined to do." Nathan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, unable to offer an alternative that addressed all their concerns. "I'll give you two some privacy to discuss it," Sheriff Miller said, rising from the table. "I need to check on my deputies anyway." As the door closed behind the sheriff, an awkward silence descended on the room. Willow stared at her hands, unable to meet Nathan's gaze. The suggestion of marriage, even one of convenience, had stirred feelings she hadn't expected, feelings she wasn't sure she was ready to examine. "Willow," Nathan said finally, his voice gentle, "look at me." She raised her eyes to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, part concern, part something deeper that made her breath catch. "This is not a decision to make lightly," he continued. "Miller's right that it would offer you legal protection, but marriage, even a temporary one, is a serious commitment." "I know," Willow whispered, "and I would never ask it of you." "You didn't ask," Nathan pointed out. "It was Miller's suggestion, not yours." He hesitated, then added, "But I'm not dismissing it outright, if it keeps you safe." Willow studied his face, searching for signs of reluctance or resentment. Finding none, she asked the question that weighed most heavily on her mind. "Would you resent me for tying you to a stranger?" Nathan's expression softened. "You're not a stranger anymore, Willow. In the past day, I've learned more about your character than I know about people I've called neighbors for years." He reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. "I won't pretend this is how I imagined marriage would come about for me, but I also won't pretend that the thought of you leaving once this is over sits well with me." Willow's breath caught at the implication in his words. "What are you saying, Nathan?" "I'm saying," he replied carefully, that I'm not opposed to the idea of making a life with you, Willow Ackerman, not just for now but for the future, if that's something you might consider." The sincerity in his eyes took her breath away. This man, who had already risked everything to protect her, was now offering her something she had never expected: to find a chance at a real future with someone who saw her value and respected her courage. "It's too soon," she protested weakly. "You can't possibly know." "I know enough," Nathan interrupted gently. "I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you have a kind heart, even after everything you've been through. I know that when I imagine my life going forward, I find myself wanting you in it." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of feeling in his voice. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "But I'm afraid, Nathan. Afraid that once this danger has passed, you'll regret binding yourself to someone with nothing to offer but gratitude." Nathan's grip on her hand tightened. "Is that what you think? That I want your gratitude?" He shook his head firmly. "What I want, Willow, is a partner, someone to share this life with, someone who sees the value in what I'm building here and wants to be part of it." "Is that something you could want too?" The question hung between them, fraught with possibilities. Willow thought of the life she had left behind in St. Louis, working long hours at the saloon, struggling to make ends meet after her parents' deaths, always one step away from destitution. Then she thought of what Nathan was offering: a home, protection, the chance to build something meaningful alongside a man of integrity. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steadier than she expected. "I think it could be." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then let's tell Miller we accept his suggestion, not as a temporary measure, but as the beginning of something real." When Sheriff Miller returned, he found them sitting side by side, their hands still joined on the table. One look at their expressions told him all he needed to know. "I take it you've reached a decision?" he asked, though the answer was evident. "We have," Nathan confirmed. "We'll marry, as you suggested, but not as a legal convenience, as a true union." Miller nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. "Good. I'll send for the preacher to come out here today. The sooner it's official, the better. Today." Willow echoed, suddenly nervous at the speed with which events were unfolding. "Burke could return at any time," the sheriff reminded her. "Once you're legally Mrs. Prescott, his claims on you become much harder to enforce, especially with witnesses to the ceremony." The practicality of this argument was undeniable, but Willow still felt a pang of regret that her wedding day would be arranged in such haste, with danger as the driving force rather than celebration. Nathan seemed to sense her thoughts. "We'll do it properly later," he promised quietly. "When all this is over, with a proper dress and guests and whatever else you want." His consideration brought a smile to her face. "I'd like that," she whispered. Sheriff Miller cleared his throat, bringing their attention back to the matter at hand. "I'll leave Deputy Jenkins here while I fetch the preacher. Should be back by mid-afternoon. In the meantime, Prescott, I suggest you prepare for visitors, friendly or otherwise." After the sheriff departed, Nathan and Willow spent the morning reinforcing the house and barn against potential attack. Willow proved surprisingly adept at handling a rifle, confirming her earlier claim about her father's teachings. They worked side by side, filling water barrels, moving ammunition to strategic locations, and boarding up vulnerable windows. Throughout their preparations, Willow found herself stealing glances at Nathan, still scarcely able to believe that by day's end he would be her husband. The thought filled her with equal parts excitement and trepidation. She had known him barely 2 days, yet already she felt a connection to him that defied logical explanation. "Having second thoughts?" Nathan asked quietly, catching her watching him as he secured the back door, Willow shook her head. Not about you, she assured him. Just about the circumstances. This isn't how I imagined getting married. Nathan set down his hammer and crossed to where she stood. Nor I, he admitted. But sometimes life takes unexpected turns. The important thing is who you're turning with. His simple wisdom eased some of the anxiety in her chest. Willow reached up impulsively and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. Nathan's eyes darkened at her touch, and for a moment Willow thought he might kiss her. But he merely covered her hand with his own, giving it a gentle squeeze before returning to his task. By early afternoon, they had transformed the ranch house into a defensible position. Deputy Jenkins patrolled the perimeter, rifle at the ready, while Nathan and Willow made final preparations inside. There's something I want to give you, Nathan said as they finished storing extra water in the pantry. He led her to his bedroom, where he opened a small wooden box on the dresser. From it, he withdrew a simple gold ring. It was my mother's, he explained, holding it out to her. My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for when I found the right woman to share my life with. Willow's eyes widened. Nathan, I couldn't possibly, you can, he interrupted gently. And you should. She would have liked you, my mother. She valued courage and kindness above all else. Touched beyond words, Willow allowed him to slip the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but the weight of it felt right somehow, as if it belonged there. Thank you, she whispered, blinking back tears. I'll treasure it always. The sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. Nathan moved quickly to the window, then relaxed. It's Miller, with the preacher and another deputy. Willow took a deep breath, smoothing her borrowed dress, one of Nathan's old shirts tucked into her own skirt, the best they could manage under the circumstances. I suppose it's time, then. Nathan took her hand, his expression serious. Are you sure about this, Willow? There's still time to change your mind. She looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes, and beyond that, something warmer that made her heart race. I'm sure, she said firmly. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. Reverend Thomas was a kind-faced older man who took their unusual circumstances in stride. The ceremony was conducted in Nathan's main room, with Sheriff Miller and his deputies serving as witnesses. The words were traditional, spoken with quiet solemnity by the preacher, and repeated by Nathan and Willow with genuine sincerity. When Nathan slipped his mother's ring onto Willow's finger for the second time, now as a symbol of their union, she felt a sense of rightness that transcended the strange circumstances that had brought them to this moment. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Reverend Thomas declared. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Nathan's kiss was gentle, almost hesitant there first, shared before witnesses in this most unconventional of weddings. Yet Willow felt its impact to her core, a promise of tenderness and passion yet to be explored. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparations and vigilance. Sheriff Miller and his deputies established a perimeter around the property, while Reverend Thomas, who insisted on staying to offer spiritual support, helped Nathan reinforce the barn. Willow found herself in the strange position of hostess, preparing a meal for the men from Nathan's limited supplies. As she worked in the kitchen, the gold band on her finger caught the light, reminding her of the extraordinary turn her life had taken in just 2 days. From captive to fugitive to wife, the transformation was almost too much to comprehend. Yet as she watched Nathan through the window, working alongside the other men with quiet competence, she felt a surge of something that might have been happiness, despite the danger that still loomed. As night fell, Sheriff Miller insisted on maintaining a watch. Burke's the type to attack at night, he explained grimly. especially if he's brought hired guns with him. Nathan nodded in agreement. Willow and I will take the second watch, he offered. You and your men need rest too. The sheriff looked as if he might protest, but then his gaze moved to Willow standing at Nathan's side and something in his expression softened. All right, he conceded. Wake us at midnight, and for God's sake be careful. As the others settled down to rest, Nathan and Willow took up positions on the front porch, rifles across their laps, watching the moonlit landscape for any sign of movement. Not exactly the wedding night most brides dream of, Nathan commented wryly, breaking the companionable silence that had fallen between them. Willow laughed softly. I think we left most behind when I climbed out of your hayloft with a gun pointed at me. Nathan's answering chuckle was warm in the cool night air. True enough, still, I'm sorry it had to be this way. Don't be, Willow said firmly. I'm not. She hesitated, then added more softly. Being your wife, even under these circumstances, is more than I dared hope for when I was running for my life 2 days ago. Nathan's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with her own. When this is over, he promised, I'll take you to Red Cloud, buy you a proper dress, maybe even convince you to dance with me at the town social. The simple normalcy of his vision for their future brought tears to Willow's eyes. I'd like that, she whispered. They maintained their vigil through the quiet hours, talking softly of their pasts, their hopes, their dreams for the future they might build together once the shadow of Elliot Burke was lifted from their lives. In those hours of shared confidences, the hasty nature of their union seemed to recede, replaced by a growing certainty that they had found in each other something genuine and lasting. The attack, when it came, was just before dawn, that darkest hour when vigilance tends to wane and exhaustion takes its toll. The first warning was a soft whinny from the horses in the corral, disturbed by something beyond the range of human senses. Nathan tensed, instantly alert. Wake Miller, he whispered to Willow. Something's wrong. Willow slipped inside without question, moving silently to where the sheriff slept. A touch on his shoulder was enough. Miller was awake instantly, his hand already reaching for his gun. They're here, he asked, his voice barely audible. Willow nodded. Nathan thinks so. The sheriff was on his feet immediately, rousing his deputies with practiced efficiency. Within moments, all were in position, the sheriff and one deputy at the rear of the house, Nathan and Willow at the front, the other deputies covering the barn and the approach to the property. The minutes stretched endlessly as they waited, straining to detect any movement in the pre-dawn darkness. Then, without warning, a shot rang out, followed by a cry of pain from the direction of the barn. Jenkins, Miller called sharply. Report. Silence was the only response. They've taken out Jenkins, Nathan said grimly. They'll try to surround the house next. As if in confirmation of his assessment, shadowy figures began to materialize from the darkness, moving with the practiced stealth of men accustomed to violence. Nathan counted at least 8, possibly more. Burke's brought an army, he muttered, raising his rifle. This is going to get ugly. We're outgunned, Sheriff Miller acknowledged from his position. But we have the advantage of position. Hold your fire until they are in range. Make every shot count. The attackers advanced cautiously, using whatever cover was available: fence posts, water troughs, the occasional boulder. Nathan tracked the nearest figure through his rifle sight, waiting for the perfect moment. When the first shot came, it was from one of Miller's deputies, taking down an attacker who had ventured too close to the house. The response was immediate, a barrage of gunfire that splintered wood and shattered windows. Nathan returned fire methodically, his military training evident in the precision of his shots. Beside him, Willow proved herself a capable marksman as well, her shots finding their targets with surprising accuracy. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Nathan asked during a momentary lull in the gunfire. "My father believed a woman should be able to defend herself," Willow replied, reloading her rifle with steady hands. "Especially on the frontier." The firefight continued as dawn broke over the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield the ranch had become. The attackers had suffered losses but showed no sign of retreating. If anything, they seemed more determined, pressing closer to the house with each exchange of gunfire. "They're trying to wear us down," Miller observed grimly, "or force us to waste ammunition. Where's Burke?" Willow asked suddenly, scanning the attackers. "I don't see him." "Probably hanging back," Nathan surmised, letting his hired guns do the dirty work. A shout from one of the attackers interrupted their conversation. "Prescott, send out the woman and we'll let the rest of you live." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Not a chance in hell," he called back, punctuating his refusal with a well-placed shot that sent the spokesman diving for cover. "They're getting desperate," Miller observed. "That's when they're most dangerous." As if to prove his point, a flaming arrow suddenly arced through the air, landing on the roof of the barn. Within seconds, flames began to spread along the dry wooden shingles. "They're trying to smoke us out," Nathan realized with growing dread. "If the house catches fire, we'll have nowhere to go." The sound of galloping hooves drew their attention. A rider was approaching from the east, not from the direction of the attackers, but from Red Cloud. "Reinforcements," Miller exclaimed, his relief evident. "Must be the rest of my deputies." As the rider drew closer, however, it became clear that this was no law enforcement officer. It was a woman, riding astride like a man, her long dark hair streaming behind her as she pushed her horse to its limits. "Who the hell is that?" Nathan muttered, watching in disbelief as the unknown woman rode directly toward the firefight, seemingly oblivious to the danger. The attackers seemed equally confused, their fire slackening as they tried to determine if this new arrival was friend or foe. The woman took advantage of their hesitation, guiding her horse directly to the front of the house and leaping from the saddle in one fluid motion. "Let me in," she shouted, pounding on the door. "Quickly." Miller nodded to his deputy, who opened the door just enough to allow the woman to slip inside. She was young, perhaps 25, with striking features and an air of fierce determination. "My name is Rebecca Turner," she announced breathlessly. "I was one of the women on the train with Willow. I've been tracking Burke since I escaped 2 days ago." Willow gasped, recognition dawning. "Rebecca, but how did you find us?" "News travels fast in small towns," Rebecca explained grimly. "When I heard in Red Cloud that Elliot Burke was gathering men to attack a rancher who was harboring a fugitive, I knew it had to be you." "You took a hell of a risk riding in here," Miller observed, though his tone held a note of admiration. Rebecca's expression hardened. "Burke sold me to a man in Lincoln who—" She faltered, then continued with renewed determination. "Let's just say I owe him some pain, but that's not why I'm here. I bring news you need to hear." "We're a little busy at the moment," Nathan pointed out as another volley of gunfire peppered the house. "Burke has sent men around to the back," Rebecca said urgently. "They're carrying kerosene. He means to burn you out." Miller cursed, signaling to his remaining deputy. "Mason, cover the rear approach. Shoot anyone who gets close with a can of kerosene." "There's more," Rebecca continued. "Burke isn't just some procurer. He's connected to a trafficking ring that operates throughout the territory. There's a federal marshal in Red Cloud right now, investigating the disappearance of several young women. When I heard about the attack, I went to him first. He's gathering a posse, but they're at least an hour behind me." Hope flared in Willow's chest. A federal marshal. With authority to arrest Burke, Rebecca nodded. For trafficking, kidnapping, and a host of other charges, but we have to hold out until he arrives. Nathan exchanged glances with Sheriff Miller. 1 hour, he said grimly. We need to make it 1 more hour. A crash from the rear of the house, followed by a shout from Deputy Mason, indicated that the attackers were indeed attempting to breach the back entrance. The smell of smoke was growing stronger, whether from the barn or from a new fire. It was hard to tell. We need to split up, Miller decided. Mason and I will hold the back. Prescott, you and the women cover the front. And for God's sake, be careful with your ammunition. We need to make it last. As the sheriff and his deputy moved to secure the rear of the house, Nathan positioned Willow and Rebecca at different windows, distributing the remaining ammunition between them. Aim for the men closest to the house, he instructed. Don't waste shots on those hanging back. The next hour passed in a blur of gunfire, smoke, and tension. The attackers pressed their advantage, moving ever closer to the house under the cover of the smoke from the burning barn. Nathan, Willow, and Rebecca maintained a steady rate of fire, picking off those who ventured too close, but their ammunition was running dangerously low. Last box, Nathan announced grimly, distributing the remaining cartridges. Make them count. The situation at the rear of the house was equally dire. Miller's occasional updates indicated that they were holding their position, but only just. The smell of kerosene was growing stronger, suggesting that the attackers were succeeding in dousing parts of the house, despite their best efforts. We need to consider our options if the marshal doesn't arrive in time, Nathan said quietly to Willow during a brief lull in the fighting. If the house catches fire. Willow understood the implication. They would have to leave the relative safety of the house, making themselves vulnerable to Burke's men. The thought sent a chill through her despite the growing heat. We'll make it, she said with more confidence than she felt. The marshal will come. Nathan's expression was grave as he touched her cheek briefly. If it comes to it, I'll create a diversion. You and Rebecca make for the creek bed to the north. Stay low, move fast, and don't look back. I'm not leaving you, Willow said fiercely, catching his hand. We face this together. Whatever comes. Before Nathan could respond, a new sound reached them, the distant thunder of many horses approaching at speed. All three rushed to the window, straining to see through the smoke. There! Rebecca exclaimed, pointing to the eastern horizon where a large group of riders was visible, moving rapidly toward the ranch. The marshal's posse. The attackers had noticed the newcomers as well. There was a flurry of activity as they abandoned their positions, rushing toward their horses tied at the edge of the property. They're running, Willow cried, relief flooding through her. They're actually running. Nathan wasn't celebrating yet. Burke, he said tensely, scanning the retreating figures. Where's Burke? A shot from directly outside the front door answered his question. The door splintered as a bullet tore through it, followed by another and another. Get back! Nathan shouted, pulling Willow away from the door just as it burst open, revealing Elliot Burke, his face contorted with rage, a smoking pistol in his hand. You've cost me everything, Burke snarled, his wild gaze fixing on Willow. If I'm going to hang, I'm taking you with me. He raised his gun, aiming directly at Willow. Nathan moved with lightning speed, throwing himself in front of her as Burke pulled the trigger. The impact of the bullet knocked Nathan backward, a bloom of red spreading across his shirt. Nathan! Willow screamed, catching him as he fell. Burke laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor as he took aim again. But before he could fire, another shot rang out. Burke's expression changed to one of surprise, then pain, as he looked down at the rapidly spreading stain on his chest. He staggered, his gun slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers, and collapsed to the floor. Rebecca stood at the side of the room, Nathan's fallen rifle in her hands, her expression cold as she stared at Burke's still form. "That was for all of us," she said quietly. Willow barely registered Rebecca's words, her attention entirely on Nathan. "Stay with me," she pleaded, pressing her hands against his wound to staunch the bleeding. "Please, Nathan, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her face with effort. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice weak but concerned. "I'm fine," she assured him, tears streaming down her face. "Thanks to you, but you need to hold on. Help is coming." As if summoned by her words, the sound of many horses arriving filled the air, followed by shouts and the pounding of boots on the porch. A tall man in a marshal's badge burst through the door, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "We need a doctor," Willow cried, looking up at him. "My husband's been shot." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The federal marshal's posse had indeed arrived, capturing or dispersing Burke's remaining men. A doctor from Red Cloud, who had accompanied the posse, worked feverishly to save Nathan's life, extracting the bullet and stitching the wound closed while Willow held his hand, refusing to leave his side even for a moment. Sheriff Miller, sporting a bandage on his arm from a graze received during the fighting, provided a full account to Marshal James Harrison, who listened with growing gravity to the tale of Burke's trafficking operation and the subsequent attack on the ranch. "You've uncovered a significant criminal enterprise," the marshal informed them when the initial chaos had subsided. "We've been tracking disappearances along the railroad for months, but Burke was careful. Your testimony, along with Miss Turner's, will be invaluable in dismantling the entire network." "What about the other women?" Willow asked, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and worry. "The ones who were still with Burke when I escaped. 2 were recovered in Lincoln," Marshal Harrison replied. "Unfortunately, the others were already transported to Omaha before we could intercept them. But now that we know where to look, we'll find them." Rebecca, who had been sitting quietly nearby, spoke up. "I want to help. I can identify the men involved, the locations they used." The marshal nodded appreciatively. "We'll need your assistance, Miss Turner. Your courage today has already saved lives." As night fell once more, the ranch slowly emptied of officials and lawmen. The marshal and his posse departed with their prisoners, promising to return for formal statements once Nathan was recovered enough to provide one. Sheriff Miller and his remaining deputies stayed behind, maintaining a watch more out of precaution than necessity now that the immediate threat had passed. In the quiet bedroom, Willow sat beside Nathan's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest as he slept under the influence of the doctor's laudanum. The physician had been cautiously optimistic the bullet had missed vital organs, and Nathan was strong and healthy. With proper care and rest, he was expected to make a full recovery. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, a cup of tea in her hands. "You should rest," she said gently, offering the cup to Willow. "I can sit with him for a while." Willow shook her head, though she accepted the tea gratefully. "I need to be here when he wakes." Rebecca nodded in understanding. "He's a good man," she observed. "The way he protected you, I've never seen devotion like that." "He saved my life," Willow said softly, her gaze returning to Nathan's peaceful face. "In more ways than one." "The marshal says I should go to Omaha to testify once they've rounded up the rest of Burke's associates," Rebecca said after a moment. "He thinks my testimony could help locate the other women and bring down the entire operation." "Will you go?" Willow asked. Rebecca nodded, a determined light in her eyes. "I have to. For all the women who didn't escape. For justice." She hesitated, then added, "You could come too. Your testimony would strengthen the case. Willow's hand moved instinctively to Nathan's, her fingers intertwining with his. My place is here, she said simply, but I'll provide a written statement if that would help. It would, Rebecca confirmed, and I understand you found something precious here. A wistful smile crossed her face. Perhaps someday I'll be so fortunate. You will be, Willow assured her. You're one of the bravest women I've ever met, Rebecca Turner. Any man would be lucky to win your heart. Rebecca squeezed Willow's shoulder gently. Get some rest, she urged again. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. After Rebecca left, Willow continued her vigil beside Nathan's bed. The events of the past days played through her mind like scenes from a fever dream, her desperate escape, finding refuge in Nathan's barn, their hasty marriage, and the violent confrontation with Burke. So much had happened in so little time that it seemed impossible to process it all. Yet through all the chaos and danger, one certainty had emerged: her feelings for Nathan Prescott. What had begun as gratitude had transformed into something deeper and more profound with each passing hour. His unwavering integrity, his gentle strength, his willingness to risk everything to protect her, all had combined to create a foundation of respect and admiration upon which something like love had begun to grow. Love. The word both thrilled and frightened her. Was it possible to fall in love so quickly? Or was this simply the intense bond formed between people who had faced death together? Nathan stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, he seemed disoriented, his gaze roaming the room before settling on Willow's face. Recognition dawned, followed by relief. You're safe, he murmured, his voice rough from sleep and pain. Willow leaned closer, her hand tightening around his. Thanks to you, she said softly. How do you feel? Like I've been kicked by a mule, Nathan admitted with a weak attempt at humor. But I'll live. Burke, dead, Willow confirmed. Rebecca shot him after he shot you. Nathan nodded, seeming satisfied with this information. The others, captured or scattered, Willow reported. The federal marshal arrived with a posse just in time. Burke's operation is being dismantled as we speak. Relief washed over Nathan's features. So it's over, he said. You're truly free now. Something in his tone caught Willow's attention, a note of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Yes, she agreed carefully. Thanks to you, I have my freedom back. Nathan's gaze dropped to their joined hands, where his mother's ring still adorned Willow's finger. Our marriage, he began haltingly. It was necessary for your protection. Now that the danger has passed, if you wish to seek an annulment. He trailed off, unable to complete the offer. Willow's heart clenched at the pain evident in his expression. Is that what you want? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's eyes met hers, vulnerability clear in their depths. No, he admitted. It's not what I want at all, but I won't hold you to vows spoken under duress. You deserve a choice, Willow. A real choice, not one forced by circumstance. Tears welled in Willow's eyes at his selflessness. Even now, wounded and vulnerable, his first thought was for her freedom, her happiness. I've made my choice, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I choose you, Nathan Prescott, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because in you, I've found something I never expected to find: a man worthy of trust, of respect. She paused, gathering her courage. Of love. The hope that dawned in Nathan's eyes was like the sunrise breaking over the plains. Love, he repeated, as if afraid he had misheard. Willow nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Love, she confirmed. I know it's fast, perhaps too fast. But these past days have shown me your character more clearly than years of courtship ever could, and what I've seen has captured my heart entirely. Nathan raised a trembling hand to her cheek, his touch gentle as he brushed away a tear. I love you too, he said simply. "I think I began falling in love with you the moment you climbed down from my hayloft, ready to face whatever came with courage and dignity." Willow turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss to its calloused surface. "Then we'll make this marriage real," she promised. "Not one of convenience or necessity, but of choice, of love." Nathan's smile was radiant despite his weakened state. "I'll hold you to that promise, Mrs. Prescott." Her new name sent a thrill through Willow. "I'm counting on it, Mr. Prescott," she replied, leaning down to seal their commitment with a tender kiss. In the days that followed, Nathan's strength returned gradually under Willow's devoted care. The ranch slowly recovered from the damage inflicted during the attack. The barn was rebuilt with the help of neighbors who rallied around the Prescotts after hearing of their ordeal. The house repaired and made whole once more. Rebecca Turner departed for Omaha to testify against Burke's associates, but not before promising to return for a proper visit once justice had been served. Sheriff Miller made regular visits, bringing news of the ongoing investigation and the gradual dismantling of the trafficking network that had operated in the shadows of the territory for too long. As summer turned to fall, Nathan and Willow settled into the rhythms of ranch life together. True to his word, Nathan took Willow to Red Cloud for a proper dress and a dance at the town social, where they were celebrated as heroes by the townspeople who had heard their story. In the quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sun set over the plains, talking of the future they would build together. Sometimes, Willow would think back to that desperate night when she had fled into the darkness, terrified and alone, and marvel at how fate had led her to the very place she was meant to be, beside a man whose courage and compassion had saved not just her life, but her faith in humanity. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat wrapped in a blanket against the growing chill, Nathan presented Willow with a small package. "What's this?" she asked, curious at the unexpected gift. "Open it and see," he urged, an eager light in his eyes. Willow unwrapped the paper to find a deed inside, a legal document transferring ownership of the ranch to both their names jointly. "Nathan," she breathed, overwhelmed by the significance of the gesture. "This is too much." "It's exactly right," he countered firmly. "This place is as much yours as mine now. We're building this life together as equal partners." Tears pricked at Willow's eyes as she leaned into his embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest, "for everything, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a home and a future." Nathan's arms tightened around her. "You saved me too," he reminded her. "From loneliness, from a life half lived. You gave me purpose and joy I never thought to find." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Willow and Nathan Prescott held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the love that had transformed a desperate flight into a journey home. In the years that followed, their ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Their family grew first with a son they named James, after the sheriff who had helped bring them together, and later with twin daughters who inherited their mother's golden hair and their father's steady determination. Rebecca Turner became a regular visitor, eventually settling in Red Cloud, where she opened a school for young women, teaching them practical skills and self-reliance. The bonds forged in danger became the foundation for a lifelong friendship, one that enriched all their lives. The trafficking network that Elliot Burke had been part of was ultimately dismantled, largely due to the testimony of the women who had escaped its clutches. The federal marshal's investigation led to numerous arrests and the rescue of dozens of young women who might otherwise have been lost to a life of exploitation and abuse. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the work of the day was done, Nathan and Willow would sometimes speak of those first frantic days of a desperate woman seeking refuge, of a principled man who refused to look away from injustice, of a love that had bloomed unexpectedly in the midst of danger. "Do you ever regret it?" Willow asked once, on the 5th anniversary of their hasty wedding. "Hiding me in your barn that day, facing down Burke and his men, it nearly cost you your life." Nathan's answer was simple and unwavering, as he had been from the beginning. "Not for a single moment," he said, drawing her close. "It brought me to you. It gave me everything that matters." In the golden light of the setting sun, Willow Prescott looked out over the land they had nurtured together, at the home they had built, at the family they had created, and knew with absolute certainty that she had found far more than refuge when she had stumbled upon Nathan's barn that fateful dawn. She had found her destiny, her purpose, her love, and not even the memory of her desperate flight could dim the joy of that discovery.